Hey, in this video I'm going to answer 5 of the most important and fundamental questions that I've received from aspiring level designers on how to approach your portfolio work and help yourself apply for your first jobs in the industry. Something to bear in mind with my answers is that I can't speak for every level design job out there, and some of my answers might lean towards the kind of AAA action games that I spent my first 10 years of my career working on. You know, as with all videos on YouTube, bear in mind that I'm just a guy with opinions. With that out of the way, let's jump into the questions. Okay, question 1 is, should I focus on working on only the types of games that I'm interested in? For example, I prefer single-player games to multiplayer. Should I only make single-player levels? What about specific genres like first-person shooters versus RPGs? My answer to this is yes. You should absolutely work on things that represent who you are, what kind of games you like, and what you'd like to work on. In my case, for example, I, as a player and a designer, like certain kinds of games. So I tend to like single-player games more than multiplayer games. I like kind of immersive first-person experiences rather than third-person. I like games that do interesting things with systems and simulation and interactive narrative. Back when I was at university, my main portfolio piece was a Half-Life 2 level. I made that because it perfectly represented the kind of games that I would like to work on. It was my favorite game at the time, and it happened to come with a great level editor. If it helps, think about this from the perspective of the studios that you're applying to. If you like first-person story-driven action games, and you apply to studios that are working on that kind of game, but you don't have levels like that in your portfolio, they might think that you don't like that kind of game. Or you might struggle against other applicants who have those kind of levels in their portfolio, and they seem like an obvious fit for that studio. So, like I say, I think you should totally work on things that represent who you are and what you'd like to do. Question 2 is using Unreal to recreate levels from existing games as level design analysis a good exercise? Recreating levels from existing games is something I've only started seeing people do in the last few years, and to be honest, I have really mixed feelings about it. First of all, as always, if you find it interesting or fun or educational to do this kind of thing and analyze other people's levels by making them yourself, then, go ahead and do it. Obviously, I'm not going to stop you from doing that. But if you're talking about it in terms of creating a portfolio piece to apply for jobs with and hopefully land an interview with, I really don't recommend you try and apply for jobs using recreations of other people's levels. At the end of the day, level design is a creative job, and a big part of what you're showing is not just your ability to use tools and, implement things, but to come up with good ideas and execute ideas yourself. So a portfolio piece that is essentially a recreation of somebody else's work doesn't really show that you have the creative or the practical skills for the job. Question number 3 is, should I make levels using Unreal or Unity, or is it better to make levels using level editors for existing games? This is one of the questions that made me want to make these videos in the first place, because I really want to get this message out to people. In my opinion, you should absolutely look for level editors for existing games that you can make your levels and portfolio work with, because when you make a level as a level designer, you need a game to make levels for, and you need a specific vision for a game, you need mechanics and assets and scripting systems to make levels with. And when you use Unreal or Unity, game engines, you start with such a blank canvas that you basically have nothing to work with. And this really holds you back in terms of the quality of the work you can do and how finished it can be and the skills that you can show in your work. As I mentioned, the main portfolio piece that I use to apply for my jobs with, I made in Half-Life 2 using the Hammer editor. And Hammer is the editor that Valve used to make Half-Life 2 and Counter-Strike and Portal and Left 4 Dead, and probably something else I'm forgetting about. It's a world-class level editor for world-class games. And so when you open that editor up, you have all of the assets and the systems and the tools that Valve use to make those games at your disposal to make your own levels with. And this is just the ideal position as a level designer. So like I say, I really recommend looking into the editors that you can use for existing games, and I'll probably try and do a video about this later because it's important. Question number 4 is, should I learn 3D modeling? Is it a skill that would help me get a job as a level designer? And my answer to this is always no. I think it's really important that at the start of your level design career, you focus on level design and not environment art. I've been a level designer for most of the last 13 years, and it's never been my job to make 3D models. And I don't even know how to do it, to be honest. Of course, it's not a bad thing if you have a good sense of visual composition, of lighting, and visual presentation in general. But I really don't recommend that at the start of your level design career, you get distracted by learning to make 3D models. Because these two roles are, very connected and overlap in a lot of ways, but they are ultimately always separate jobs. And it's important that you show that you understand that and that you also focus on putting the time into creating good level design and interactive work rather than visual work. And the last question is, when games companies mention gameplay scripting in their level design job descriptions, what do they mean? Should I be able to program gameplay mechanics and new features? This is another question that I'm really glad people asked me, because I would never have thought to ask this question because it was not as confusing back when I got into the industry as it is now. I think the source of confusion here is the fact that now people use Unreal and Unity to make a lot of games, and scripting in those two engines, the term scripting can refer to lots of different things. In Unreal, you can basically script using the Blueprint tool, and it's so powerful that you can essentially program with it. You can make mechanics and entire games with Blueprint. And in Unity, you create scripts using C#, which is essentially programming, and that's how you program the entire game. So I can see how the use of the term scripting has become more confusing and fuzzy over the years. But to get to the point, in level design land, when we talk about scripting and level scripting or gameplay scripting, we're not talking about creating mechanics or features generally. What we're talking about is specifically the level logic and scripting that goes into creating a level and the experience that happens and unfolds around the player. A typical example of this might be a scripted sequence that is triggered by the player moving into a certain position or pressing a button or something that activates it. And it might involve NPC behaviors of them moving into place, or enemies spawning and special effects being triggered and animations and stuff. All the stuff that level designers do to create the intended experience. So that's generally the kind of thing that level scripting refers to. It's not about creating mechanics or features, but about creating levels, the sequence of events that happen for the player to react to. This is another reason why I recommend using level editors for existing games, because when you do that, it means that you can also use all the scripting tools that we use to make that game. Quite a big part of the level design job is about those creative decisions that you make through level scripting. And for some reason, we don't talk about this enough, in my opinion, so I'll probably make some videos in the future that go into the impact that level scripting has on defining the player experience. Okay, so those are the top 5 questions that I received about how to approach your portfolio work, and I hope that was useful. If you come away from this wanting to ask your own questions, then feel free to do so in the comments. And if you haven't already, I recommend you take a look at my other video where I show you the portfolio piece that I applied for jobs with, and I give you commentary over it and some advice at the end. Okay, that's it for now. Cheers.